And let's go ahead and start with our definition of consumer behavior. Consumer behavior is the process we use to select, purchase, use, and dispose of goods, services, ideas, or experience to satisfy needs or desires. There are internal factors that influence consumer behavior. There are situational factors that influence consumer behavior. There are social factors that influence consumer behavior. But let's start with our basic decision-making process, which again is relatively commonsensical. Step one, problem recognition. Now, this occurs when the consumer sees a significant difference between the current state and the ideal state. There's a problem. Now, marketers can develop ads that stimulate problem recognition. For example, radio ads promoting restaurants which are played at lunchtime, or TV ads showing the excitement of owning a new car. So, step one, problem recognition. Step two, information search. I have a problem, I need some information. So consumers need adequate information to make a reasonable decision. They start by searching memory in the environment, and then they go deeper. Internet search engines increasingly being relied upon. Now, behavioral targeting is occurring with regard to the internet. This is where marketers deliver ads for products consumers look for by watching what they do online. For example, very recently I looked at a couple of hotels in Hawaii. And so when I was looking at the sports news, I immediately had a pop-up ad above it for the Sheraton Waikiki Hotel, simply as a result of looking at other hotels a couple of days earlier. So step two, information search. And based on what you're doing on the internet, marketers will target you specifically with that so-called behavioral targeting. They'll bring that information to you. Okay, step three, evaluation of alternatives. You've got different options. So at this stage, the consumer identifies a small number of products in which he or she is interested, then narrows the choices and compares the pros and cons of each. What criteria are used? Well, evaluative criteria include product characteristics that consumers use to compare competing alternatives, and marketers try to figure out what those evaluative criteria will be. Step four, product choice. The marketer makes a choice. Consumers often rely on heuristics to make decisions. Now, a heuristic is a rule of thumb, a mental rule of thumb used for a speedy decision, such as, these are all good examples of heuristics, price equals quality. People will definitely make a judgment based on the price. Or brand loyalty. It comes from Betty Crocker. I know it's good. Or country of origin. It's German manufacturing. I know it's going to be very, very precise, and so on. Step number five, now that the product has been purchased, now there's the post-purchase evaluation. And here's where consumers decide if they're satisfied or dissatisfied with the product. And this process is critical. The degree of satisfaction is influenced by whether or not expectations were met or exceeded. So for the company, marketing communications really need to create accurate expectations for the product. Cognitive dissonance, kind of like buyer's remorse, that's common, and so marketers try to, minimize that. Now, if we walk through that consumer decision-making process, again, step one is problem recognition. For example, Brandon is fed up with his old car. That's the problem. I've got a junky car. So now step two is information search. Brandon talks to friends, visits car showrooms, read consumer reports to get an idea of what cars he might be interested in. Step three, evaluation of alternatives. Brandon narrows his choices to several models and thinks about the good and bad features of each option. Step four, product choice, purchase. Brandon chooses one car. And then finally, step five, post-purchase evaluation. Figure out whether he's happy with that decision or not. How much time and effort will consumers put into this decision-making process? It depends big time. The amount of effort expended by consumers varies greatly according to whether or not it's extended problem solving versus habitual decision making. For example, a vacation, that's a much more extended problem solving situation. The consumer is going to put a lot more thought and effort and time into that versus habitual decision making. I'm out of milk, I buy milk. Or a new car, very, very extended problem solving versus I need to buy a box of cereal. We'll look more deeply at this issue, new car versus box of cereal, in just 1 minute. Other ways that it varies is the level of involvement, the relative importance of perceived consequences of the purchase, which of course is tied to perceived risk. The choice of the product has potentially negative consequences. For example, that car versus box of cereal decision. Now, that level of involvement is obviously very, very high for the car. That's a very important decision. Low for the box of cereal. That's an unimportant decision. The perceived risk for the car, that's very, very high. It's an expensive, complex product. For the box of cereal, it's low. It's a simple, low-cost product. Information processing, much more extensive for the car. Careful processing of information. Much less extensive for the cereal, going to respond to environmental cues, the store signage, the box itself. Learning model for the car, cognitive learning. Thinks deeply about it, uses insight and creativity to use the information that's found. For the habitual decision making of the box of cereal, more behavioral learning, what you've done in the past. And needed marketing actions, well, marketers of cars know that people are going to want a lot of information, so they provide a lot of information via advertising, salespeople, brochures, websites. With regard to the cereal, they provide those environmental cues at the point of purchase, such as product display. Very, very different type of situation for something like a car purchase versus a box of cereal purchase. Now, again, a lot of that is pretty common sense stuff.